Football's child abuse scandal grows. An amusement park is targeted by terrorists. And Black Friday is back. You're watching 5 News tonight. The former England footballer Paul Stewart is the highest profile figure so far to go public with his accusations of abuse. I'll be asking him why he believes children are still at risk today.
There are still predators out there. It's not just football, it's sport in general.
The French authorities give new details of a foiled terror plot to attack Disneyland Paris. And the bargain hunters turning Black Friday into a £2 billion bonanza. Also tonight, we're asking if police mistakes allowed this man to become a serial killer. Stephen Port will die in prison, but would some of his victims still be alive if police hadn't bungled the investigation? Good evening, welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Matt Barbett. The child abuse scandal at the heart of football is growing, with claims there was an historic paedophile ring and predators are still operating in the sport today. 5 footballers have now come forward to publicly allege they were abused by youth coach Barry Bennell. 4 police forces, including the Metropolitan Police, have now confirmed they're investigating allegations within football. And today, more former players have gone public, as Julian Drucker reports.
Never told anyone. Kept it locked away right in the back of my head.
As the scale of this scandal grows, so too does the pain for those reliving their abuse as youth footballers. Today on TV, 2 more former players came forward to speak out. Chris Unsworth says he was raped up to 100 times whilst in the Manchester City and Crewe Alexandra youth teams.
You just get on with your life and you forget everything that has happened. As I say, luckily I had my golf to go to and that guided me through, I think. But both my parents have died and that hurts me.
Yeah.
Once again, the alleged abuser is Barry Bennell. The former Crewe Alexandra youth coach and scout has been jailed on 3 separate occasions for abusing young boys. But now several police forces are investigating whether his convictions underestimate his crimes. Currently out on licence, he wasn't at home when police raided it. They left with possessions and even his pet. As the allegations escalate, an unnamed ex-Newcastle United player has reportedly contacted police about this man. George Ormond, a coach in the North East, has already been jailed for 6 years for numerous sexual assaults. Meanwhile, an NSPCC hotline set up for those abused within youth football continues to be busy.
We get people calling us because they have some concerns about children now, not necessarily about sexual abuse, but other forms of concerns. And we're also getting parents coming through to us asking what is a very relevant question: is my child safe in football now?
But former footballer Paul Stewart, who says he was abused, believes children today are still vulnerable across all sports.
There are still predators out there. It's not just football, it's sport in general. The access to children in sport is greater than I think in most places apart from schools. So, and the way in which they manipulate them and saying that they can make them stars or whatever they do to get access to them, it won't be, it'll still be going on somewhere.
The courage of ex-footballer Andy Woodward in speaking out is unearthing dozens, perhaps hundreds, of similar stories. Julian Drucker, 5 News.
Well, we saw former England player Paul Stewart in that film from Julian. Paul joins us now from his home in Blackpool. Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. It appears this is taking its toll on you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. In a sense that it's been a long week. I wanted to do as much as possible so that Andy wasn't left alone to sort of put out there what I think people now realise is going on within sport, or certainly has gone on in the past to a greater extent than what they actually thought it was.
He certainly isn't alone. Of course, you're now not the only footballer who's come out to talk about this, but you are the only one who's spoken about being a victim of abuse without naming the abuser. Why?
For legal reasons, really. I'm unable to name the abuser, just for legal reasons, really. The police have said to me that if I did name the abuser, then it would be possibly more difficult to get a conviction if they find him. And I've been told that because it's an accusation, that lawyers have said that I'd be better not to name him. But I don't think it'll be too long before his name's out there, because I know that other people have come forward who he's abused, some of them anonymously. But, as keeps getting said, this is just the tip of the iceberg on a wider range than just the Northwest, from what I've been led to believe.
In your case, Paul, which police force is investigating? Are they seeking to get an arrest? Are they keeping you up to date with what is being done on their part?
Well, I spoke to them only Thursday. I have been down to London, as people have seen, and I've been doing a lot of media interviews. So they're coming to my house on Tuesday to talk to me formally in regards to, as they say, the allegations that I've made.
Plenty of people will appreciate you and the other former players having the bravery to talk about this, because no doubt it's a difficult thing to do, because it has taken such a toll on your life in ways that perhaps you couldn't ever have imagined before this happened.
Yes, and that's why I thought when I saw Andy's piece in the Mirror, it was important for me to come, not just, for my story in particular, but I didn't want Andy's story being in the paper one day and then, it's sort of fading into insignificance. I thought that because I'd played for some of the bigger clubs in my country, that it would put even more pressure on the authorities to look into it, and also, for people to come forward that haven't quite, made it in sport. It doesn't really matter what walk of life that they've come from. They're suffering the same as I've suffered. It just so happens that I'm able to use the power of media to get the story out there. But I'm no more important than anyone else that this has happened to. And I'm sure that there are many more people struggling with the issues that I've struggled with over the many years.
And now you have spoken publicly. What would you say to those other footballers, perhaps higher profile still, who might be considering saying something but are concerned about doing that?
Yeah, it's very difficult to try and make people come forward. They've got to be comfortable. I saw the story on the Friday, and then I still took the weekend to speak to my family, my children, my wife, my parents who are still alive, to make sure that they were going to be comfortable with me coming forward, because it doesn't just impact me. I mean, they have gone through the pain that I've gone through, as I've stated in the media, but I've still got, I felt that I was duty bound to make sure that they were okay with me coming forward. And I wouldn't want to pressure anyone into coming forward that doesn't feel that it's right for them to do so. But if we don't come forward, then it's sort of a gilt-edged sword. We're never going to be able to bring these people to justice.
Paul Stewart, many thanks indeed for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Now, relatives of the victims of serial killer Stephen Port have cheered in court as he was told he will die in jail. The 41-year-old was sentenced to life for poisoning 4 men with fatal doses of a date rape drug. He'd stalked his young victims on gay dating websites before luring them to his London flat. Despite striking similarities between the murders, relatives of his final victim had to demand answers for the police to then make a link, as Dominic Reynolds explains.
The families arrived, all missing sons and brothers. The sisters of Jack Taylor said he was the life and soul of their family. Daniel Whitworth's family said the 22-year-old was kind and had everything going for him. Relatives of Anthony Walgate said all he wanted to do was follow his dream of being a fashion designer. And from Slovakia, the brother of Gabriel Kavari said he'll live forever in our hearts. Stephen Port killed all 4 with overdoses of a date rape drug to satisfy his lust, a judge said today, as he handed down a whole life sentence to the rapist and serial killer.
That sick, twisted scumbag will never be able to hurt or destroy anyone else's family or life. Jack can finally rest in peace. We will always be completely heartbroken as a family.
I don't recognise his face.
So you don't recognise his face?
I do not know, no.
He denied knowing Jack Taylor in this police interview, and while his story changed repeatedly, Stephen Port never told the truth about what he did. The judge said Stephen Port had caused immense distress to the families of his victims because of the wicked and monstrous lies he'd told in court to cover his tracks. When he told him, "You will die in prison," there was applause and cheering from the public gallery. But the police are under pressure now as the watchdog investigates how Stephen Port was able to fool them. Police believed Port when he said Anthony Walgate gave himself the lethal overdose in Port's flat, and they believed this fake suicide note on Daniel Whitworth's body. It was written by Stephen Port and covered in his DNA, which they had on file, but they didn't test it. And in the year that passed before Jack Taylor's death, they took calls from members of the public concerned that a serial killer was on the loose, but they dismissed them. Journalist Benjamin Cohen contacted police with concerns, but was told the deaths of 3 gay men in East London weren't connected.
We were told that actually there wasn't a story for us to write about. There was no link between, at that point, three people who died, and that really it wouldn't be a very good idea for us to publish this because it would scare people.
3 of the bodies were found in this churchyard in almost the same spot. Gay rights campaigners want the police to ask themselves, did discrimination play a part in missed clues?
This may point to possible institutional homophobia, similar to the institutional racism that was identified by the Macpherson report after the murder of Stephen Lawrence.
The Metropolitan Police say they're cooperating with investigators and they're looking again at 58 date rape deaths in London to see if this man might have taken more lives. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News.
So if officers had acted sooner and realised that Stephen Port was a serial killer, could lives have been saved? Let's ask former Detective Peter Bleksley. And human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, who we saw in that report, is with us now. Peter Bleksley, as Peter Tatchell alluded to in that piece, do the police have an irrational problem with gay people?
Well, I sincerely hope not. But I come from the period of evolution when the police were, well, racism was compulsory, let alone institutionalised. And I would like to think, through the contact that I get with officers who are still serving, that they've taken great steps to move away from that. If this Police Complaints Commission investigation turns up evidence that the police are in some way, shape or form institutionally homophobic, I hang my head, the reverberations will be massive.
Well, we don't know what it's going to come up with, but it took a public inquiry to label the Metropolitan Police institutionally racist. Peter Tatchell, what do you think? Do you think there's institutional homophobia? And if there is, how long is that going to take to sort out?
Well, it certainly looks like biased assumptions about gay men and drug use did play a role in the police mishandling of this case. And that could amount to institutional homophobia. But I think we need to have a full public inquiry to delve into that issue, not just in relation to this case, but in the wider issue of policing, not just in London, but all across the country, as it affects the LGBT community?
Well, as it affects anybody, actually, anybody who's a victim of crime or something as hideous as this, Peter Bleksley, and you think there are wider reasons for these kind of obvious mistakes being made, not just perhaps institutional prejudice in police forces?
When I was a young, aspiring detective wanting to be the best I possibly could be, some wise old detectives said to me a couple of things which I think are very apposite to this case. One of them was never assume anything. Assumption is the mother of all muck-ups. And the second one was there's no such thing as coincidence. If a detective investigating any of these deaths in the very early stages had those thoughts ringing in the back of his mind, then I think the outcomes would have been better, and I think some of these young men would still be alive today.
Peter Tatchell, in a city as vibrant, cosmopolitan as London, how does this make, do you think, and I know you don't speak for the gay community as a total, how do you think this makes gay people feel, the way that, you know, in such a hideous crime, they're being treated like second-class citizens?
Well, I think a lot of people feel we've been here before. We remember the police bungles when it came to the serial killings of gay men by Dennis Nielsen in the 1970s, by Michael Lupo in the 1980s, and by Colin Ireland in the 1990s. After all those terrible killings, the police promised to learn the lessons. They said they would take on board the LGBT community's concerns. They promised that in all future circumstances of unexplained disappearances or deaths of gay men, that they would, first of all, warn the gay community about the possibility of a killer or serial killer on the loose, that they would liaise with the gay community, and that they would make public appeals to the gay community for people to come forward with information. Now, this was not done in the Stephen Port murders until 2015, October to be precise, after the fourth young man had been murdered. After the second young man had been murdered in August 2014, the police should have joined the dots and at least raised the issue, the possibility, with the LGBT community, and I suspect if they'd done so, then perhaps one or two of these young men may still be alive today.
Well, quite. There's a lot of things should have been done. We await with interest the results of the investigation into these officers who are being looked at for the time being. Thank you, gentlemen, both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, the Metropolitan Police are also being accused of putting children in London at risk because of serious failings in the way that sexual abuse is dealt with. An official watchdog found that 3/4 of cases were handled inadequately by the force. It also pointed to systemic inconsistencies and a lack of leadership. And 12 people have been arrested on suspicion of arson over a series of enormous wildfires in Israel. The fires have been burning around the country for 4 days now, with tens of thousands of people ordered to evacuate their homes. Still to come on 5 News Tonight. How the French authorities foiled a new terror threat to Disneyland Paris. And we are spending billions, so why has Black Friday become just so big?
So have you been on a bit of a spree? What have you got here?
I've got some Christmas crackers, I've got some fairy lights for my Christmas tree.
You're ready for Christmas?
I'm ready for Christmas.
That's coming up after the break, don't go away. Welcome back, you're watching 5 News Tonight. In France, the authorities have released more details about a terror attack they believe was being planned for as soon as next week. They say that 5 men arrested on Sunday were plotting an act of terror ordered by so-called Islamic State, with Disneyland Paris as one of the possible targets. Charlotte Grant's here with me now. This is pretty significant stuff, Charlotte.
Yes, and the fact that the French authorities have gone into such details today shows they think that it is significant. Now, they believe it was masterminded from Syria or Iraq. So these 5 men that were arrested in Strasbourg and Marseille, the authorities believe that those men were given orders by Islamic State militants to carry out an attack in France. As for where or when, Disneyland Paris was one of the targets, and so was the headquarters for the police and intelligence services in Paris. Authorities believe it was being planned for as early as next Thursday. France is in a state of emergency and has been ever since the Paris attacks last year. So this latest news is only going to add to the uncertainty that's felt there.
Undoubtedly. Thank you very much indeed, Charlotte. Next, unhealthy lifestyle choices like smoking and drinking are being blamed for a huge rise in the number of people who are getting mouth cancer. That's according to new figures from Cancer Research UK, which shows rates have increased by more than 2/3 over the past 20 years. Our health editor, Catherine Jones, has been to meet one woman who was diagnosed with the disease.
8 years ago, when the youngest of her 5 children was only 1, Rachel Parsons discovered a painful ulcer in her mouth was cancer.
So it's quite a large patch.
She had to have part of the inside of her cheek removed and skin taken from her wrist to replace the cancerous tissue. The mental scars have taken far longer to heal.
I was assigned 2 cancer nurses, and one I asked, was I going to die? And her answer was she couldn't answer that question. So that got me, because obviously I've got 5 small children.
Now, a new analysis has revealed cases of mouth cancer have jumped by 68% over the last 2 decades, with the number of people diagnosed annually rising from 3,700 20 years ago to more than 7,500 a year now. It's estimated that 2/3 of those cancers are linked to smoking.
It could be that we're seeing this increase now, and that's based on how many people were smoking, say, 20, 30 years ago. So as we've seen the smoking rates decrease, hopefully we'll start to see that in the number of people getting cancer also decreasing soon.
But drinking alcohol, having a poor diet without enough fruit and veg, and being infected with the human papilloma virus, HPV, also raise the risk of oral cancers, meaning the upward trend in cases may continue. Rachel believes we all need to be much more vigilant.
You brush your teeth, you have a look, yeah, they're clean, and that's it. Oh, I've got a little ulcer, oh, it's fine, it'll go. And they've still got that ulcer 3 weeks later, and it's fine, it'll go. But people need to be aware that anything different in their mouths does need to be looked at.
Rachel is lucky her disease was caught early, but each year more and more people are contracting this form of cancer. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
What are the warning signs? And if you're worried, what should you do about it? Let's ask dentist now, Henrik Overgaard Nielsen, who's with me. Do you see this a lot, Henrik? How rare is it?
As an individual dentist, you don't see it that often, but it's very important that when you do see it, that you actually get people treated very, very quickly. The difference between the survival rates if you catch it quickly or if you catch it later is between 50% if you catch it quickly and 90%, or rather if you catch it late and 90% if you catch it quickly.
That lady said if you have a mouth ulcer that won't go away, you should get checked out. I mean, mouth ulcers are pretty common. People will be watching now have got a mouth ulcer and think, well, it probably will go away. Should they be overly concerned about that?
No, if you've got a mouth ulcer, then make a note of when you first notice it, and if it's not gone in 3 weeks' time, you should go to the dentist and have it checked out. But the vast majority of mouth ulcers will go away within a couple of weeks.
But this idea that smoking and drinking are prevalent in the overwhelming number of cases of mouth cancer suggests that maybe there's a bit of a time bomb here, because there's clearly a lag between smoking and people developing a mouth cancer.
It's absolutely true. People smoke for 20, 30 years and suddenly it catches up with them and you get a mouth cancer. And the problem with mouth cancer is not only is it very dangerous, but also it can be very disfiguring because you can then lose half your jaw, and that will obviously affect your looks, but it will also affect your ability to eat and your ability to speak.
And the other reasons that people could develop it, less than smoking and drinking, but still important, are having a diet deficient in fruit and vegetables, and also the human papillomavirus. What can people do about those things?
Well, there is vaccination now for the human papillomavirus, and I think there is a push now. I think it's offered to all girls in the age of 12 and 14, right, I believe, and it should, in my opinion, also be offered to the boys as well, because we do see cancers because of human papillomavirus with men as well.
So briefly, Henrik, something that people might want to investigate is getting that.
Absolutely. Consider having a vaccination for human papillomavirus. Absolutely. That's 13% of mouth cancers. So that's important. Okay. But I also think the important thing is that people really should visit the dentist. And we know that it's only about half the adult population that generally see a dentist.
They're probably the ones who really should, aren't they?
Yeah.
Henrik, many thanks indeed. Next, it's the super shopping day of the year, the so-called Black Friday, of course, where we spend billions chasing those bargains and cut-price goods. But this year, more than any other, British shoppers have been shunning the actual shops to instead get their deals online. Whilst it means stores on the high street have been quieter than expected, it's been a different story on the internet, as Minnie has been finding out now.
Black Friday. For the committed bargain hunter, Christmas has come early. Or at least that's what the big stores want you to believe. Sale signs designed to tempt you to buy more. Only this year, not quite the chaos some had predicted. These were the scenes inside one shop. But don't be fooled, we're still shopping, just online more. Welcome to Santa's Grotto, or Amazon HQ in Hertfordshire, where across the country they're expecting to make over £7 million today.
How much has Black Friday sort of accelerated in the last couple of years for you guys?
Well, look, I think it's extremely popular with customers. We have thousands of deals available for them. And really this year we've extended it to be 12 days running up to this day because we've just had so much demand for it.
How many things are you selling, say, per minute?
I reckon in the last minute we've been talking, based on last year we would have sold about 5,000 items and we'd expect a bit more than that this year.
Just in 1 minute?
Just in a minute.
Of course, it's no longer just a stampede of shoppers online, but warehouses like this also give us our bargain fix. In fact, we have become so obsessed with Black Friday as a nation that it's now thought we'll spend nearly £2 billion on a massive shopping spree across the UK. But more than half of that will be online. It's just a little bit more civilised, isn't it?
Yes, 2 years ago in Britain, people were literally falling over themselves for the best deal on Black Friday.
It's a really quite bizarre phenomenon. Black Friday makes no sense in the UK. It's an American import on a normal working day. It's just a nonsense. That's why the retailers have tried to do things differently and actually spreading their promotions over probably a dozen days rather than just today.
Today at Brent Cross Shopping Centre in London, the sales may be stealing someone's thunder, but shoppers remain calm. Mostly. Well, this boy knows a bargain when he sees one.
So have you been on a bit of a spree? What have you got here?
I've got some Christmas crackers. I've got some fairy lights for my Christmas tree.
You're ready for Christmas?
I'm ready for Christmas.
What is the big appeal of Black Friday? Because it's pretty busy. It could be quite stressful. Why? Why do
you
it?
just want to get a bargain, don't you? Everyone wants a bargain.
There's so many people. Would you
I've
rather
been
do it
here
online?
since 9.
9 a.m.
Yeah, since 9 o'clock.
Are you ready to go home, or have you got a full schedule of shopping
I'm
still?
nearly done, and then I'm going home and put my feet up.
For a long lie down?
Yes.
It's crowdy.
So why do it?
Well, it's just the feeling of it.
You like the buzz?
Yeah.
Do you like the buzz?
Yes, we like it.
With the majority of us shopping online, there may be less of a mad rush on the high street, but with record sales still predicted, it seems our insatiable appetite for a bargain lives on. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
And that report was half price. That's it from us for now. Chris Page has the weekend weather next. I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.